Welcome to the Power of Design podcast, where we have inspiring conversations that explore the intersection of architecture, construction, and real estate, so we can understand the dynamics and trends that shape an exciting and powerful built environment. This is your host, Jack Osa. In this episode of The Power of Design, I will be talking to Mark LePage. Mark is the perfect combination between architect and entrepreneur. He is the founder of Entrearchitect, CEO of Gabl Technologies, and the president of Fivecat Architecture Studio. It is a great pleasure for me to talk to Mark, since I have been listening to his podcast for years and following his companies as he transforms the way we see and practice architecture. We talk about his personal and professional journey, business technology, and the power of design. This is my conversation with Mark. Mark, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
I am great, Jack. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
No, I'm so excited to have you here. You've been a person that I've been following for years. Your podcast started in the architecture world, and I'm very excited to have you here. Mark, as an architect, you have been developing a very interesting non-traditional career. You start other types of businesses that leverage online platforms to create unique value to your audience. Why do you think architects have a hard time applying their design skills to develop profitable business strategies?
Yeah, I think that business has always been something that architects have struggled with because we're not built that way. Most of us are built as more like artists than we are business owners. And I think that when we decide at a young age to become an architect, whether it's as a child or sometime in your college career, the idea that you're going to be a business person never really crosses your mind.
Right.
It's not something that architecture schools teach. And so it's very often sort of an abrupt discovery when we become architects that if we want to start our own practice, we have to build a business and we don't know how.
Yeah.
And so I think that very often we don't embrace business because we're afraid. We don't really know what to do and how to do it. And so we sort of just focus on the design and hope everything else works.
Yeah, and we've known this for years. Why do you think architecture schools have not been teaching this?
I've talked to people in architecture schools about this, and most architecture programs don't feel that it is their responsibility, that the way that architects in the United States have been trained, and I don't know how architects outside of the United States are trained, but within the United States, the architects are trained in architecture school to think architecturally, to think as an architect, right? That's their job. That's how they define their job. And let me just say that it's changing, that there is more business being introduced to architecture schools. There's more entrepreneurism being talked about in architecture schools. But when I went to architecture school in the early 90s, there was nothing about business. There was one professional practice course, and it did not focus on business fundamentals. It really focused on contracts and the things that really was about contracts.
Yeah.
And so it is something that architects our schools are starting to recognize, but they still don't feel that it's their job. So the architecture school's job currently is to teach design, to teach the process of being an architect, right? Either technically or from a design point of view. Then the internship is where that's supposed to happen, right? You're supposed to learn about the business of architecture and about how to practice as an architect within that internship process. And that isn't happening either. That traditionally architects have been very secretive about what they do as architects. Mm-hmm. It's very unlikely that an intern will have any exposure to the business side of a firm, especially in larger firms. And so it's not being learned there either. And so when architects finally do get licensed, they either go work for a firm and don't really understand how that firm works, or they go start their own firm and have to learn how to run that business, in the field, right? And they have to learn the fundamentals of business to figure out how to make that business work. Some of us are built that way, and we like that. Like me, I really love that, which is why I sort of pursued that. But others, like my wife, who's also an architect and my partner in my architecture firm, doesn't like that side, right? And if it wasn't for me, she would be struggling through learning how to do that as well, because she wants to practice on her own, but doesn't like the business side of it.
Right.
And so she would either need to learn how to do that and do it herself, or she would have to find somebody to be able to partner with who does like it.
Yeah, and I agree with you that things are changing, and not just from the architecture school point of view, but just because of the access of information we have to social media today. We know what can be done, because sometimes we just don't know. If nobody shows you how you do it, well, you don't know what you don't know. But now with the overwhelming amount of information we have access to, through social media, Google, YouTube, you can say, oh, wow. Oh, yes, you can start a firm. Oh, there is a way to do it. There are these steps you need to follow. So, okay, I'm going to try it. So I think that's creating a new sense of awareness, helping younger generations to take the step forward to start your own firm. Mark, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in New Jersey. I was in Paramus, New Jersey, is where I was raised. I lived there until I got married, and my parents actually still have a home there. And Paramus is about a half hour west of New York City. So just in the New York City metropolitan area is where I grew up.
Yep. And where did you go to school?
I went to school at Roger Williams University, Bristol, Rhode Island.
Okay. And tell me about your first job once you graduated.
My first job was with Barry Postkanzer Architect in Ridgewood, New Jersey. He is and was an entrepreneur architect. And so he taught me a lot, actually. A small firm, just a few people. And so I had exposure to some of the business side of things, but certainly he was a developer. He had many buildings that he had designed. He designed and developed an entire residential development as an architect, all modern houses. So very inspirational. I learned a lot, and I owe Barry a lot. And in fact, Barry often will take full credit for my entire life, because he also introduced me to my wife.
Wow.
Because Anne Marie also worked at Barry's office, and that's where we met and fell in love and got married and raised our family. So Barry takes full credit for my business.
Oh, he deserves the credit.
Kids, everything.
That's awesome. And after that, tell me about the following other jobs you had, and how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. I started at Barry's office intentionally. I wanted to find a small firm to work with. Although I did come out of architecture school in the early 90s. 93 is when I graduated, in a recession, so that nobody was hiring. And so I did lots and lots of resume dropping and trying to get work. I had a very unique resume, which is one of the reasons I got that job. Is I developed sort of a brochure about myself rather than a resume. And the resume was part of that brochure. It was before computers, computers obviously existed, but it was before people started using computers and PDFs and all of that didn't really exist. It was all paper. And so my resume stood out. And what happened is that Barry hired me as part-time to measure 435 condominium units.
Wow.
And most of them were identical. Yeah. Apparently there was a lawsuit about square footage, and the developer hired Barry, who was the original designer of the units, to go back and measure every unit. And he hired me for the summer to do that. And I embraced it. And that was what I did all summer. And I did a great job. And when it was all done, he recognized that and he hired me. And so that was my first job, small firm. Then I wanted to, I always knew I wanted my own firm from childhood. Yeah. I was an entrepreneur. And so that was always the goal, have my own firm. And so from Barry's office, I left there after a few years and I went to the other extreme. I worked for URS Consultants, which I think is now part of Grenier, URS.
Sure.
I forget what they're called now, but it's one of the largest, if not the largest, engineering and architecture firms in the world. There was an office in Paramus. And so I went there and I worked for them for about 9 months, 10 months, I think. And I did that intentionally to sort of learn the big side, the big corporate side of architecture. Although that was a very large engineering firm that had a small engineering division at the time. And so it was still sort of like a medium-sized firm within a huge corporation.
Yeah.
But I learned that and gained a lot of experience there. And then when after that, when I got married, I moved. No, it was before I got married. My wife, who was not yet my wife, got a job in Westchester County in New York, about 40 minutes north of New York City. And so we knew we were going to get married. And so I looked for a job in Westchester, moved to KG&D Architects, Skyer, Garment, and Davidson, which is actually Russ Davidson's firm, who is past president of AIA National. And so I worked for them before Russ was president. I worked for KG&D for about 4 or 5 years as a project manager there. And they're a medium-sized firm. So, well, really a small firm, but a larger small firm. And that's sort of where I sort of found the balance between the really small firm and the large firm. And then once I got to the point where I could get licensed, I told them that I was going to leave. I was on track to be partner there, so that was sort of uncomfortable to leave there and start my own practice. But that was always my plan. And I went out and started a practice with Anne-Marie, my wife.
Nice. So tell me about that practice. What type of projects do you guys focus on? Who are your clients?
Sure. We started our practice in 1999. Anne-Marie was licensed and I was not yet licensed. So we started the practice as Anne-Marie McCarthy Architect. When I left KG&D, I started a freelance job where I created a new company called the Construction Documents Company. And I freelanced for other architects. And I built a business freelancing for other architects, mostly focusing on existing conditions surveys, and doing the work that architects don't like to do. And so that's what I did. I went in and I measured houses for other architects locally, put together the existing conditions CAD documents, and made a lot of money doing that. It was very profitable because you can charge a lot, and it was pretty easy. It's something you can easily build systems around.
Yeah.
Also something that I wish I never stopped, because I could have continued that, not continued it as my sole business, but I could have built that into an automated business with lots of delegated employees and could have had that as a larger project. But that wasn't the plan. That was a transition job, and I shut that down when I got licensed, became a partner with Anne-Marie, and launched Fivecat Studio in 1999, and focused on residential architecture. At first, we did lots of small projects. We did restaurants. We did lots of retail, boutique retail kind of storefront projects, but always very high-end, detailed, residentially feeling projects. Even the office spaces that we did were very detailed and very focused on sort of a residential feeling, because our goal was always to sort of do high-end residential. So it was sort of a surprise. 2 architects at 29 years old, really young to start their own firm.
Right.
Very naive, not really understanding how business worked, not really understanding that we were competing against residential firms that have been around for 30 years.
Wow.
With giant portfolios.
Yeah.
We were competing in a very, very competitive residential market. This is Westchester County, Greenwich, Connecticut, that area where all of the executives from New York City all live. They either live in Westchester County, Greenwich, or Long Island in New York. And so it was a very competitive market, and failed miserably at trying to get those large projects as 2 young architects with no portfolio. And then very, very, well, not very quickly, eventually learned that there was a sort of a niche within the residential market between the really, really small kitchen, bathroom renovation stuff that sole practitioners were doing and the high-end full renovations and new homes that we really wanted. In between there were these additions and renovation alteration projects that could still be very high-end, but they were too small of a project for those bigger firms at the time. And so we focused on that market and became a specialist in those projects. We called them high-end small projects. And we built a brand around that. Fivecat Studio was a brand that was very focused on high-end small projects, essentially additions and alterations, and built a really, really successful business around that. And eventually did be able to grow a reputation and a portfolio that allowed us to then compete for some of those larger home projects that we always wanted.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, because I think, as we talked at the beginning, the business side, it seems that you have that natural inclination to poke around what the business is like. And I think number one, just the ability to take the step and start your own firm very young, which a lot of people may have many excuses like, I don't have the experience, or they don't have the confidence to do it. And you guys had that confidence in yourself mainly. And two, the ability to spot that niche, which is not easy, because typically, and that's one of the things that even I struggle with in my business. We want to do a lot of things because we think we get more opportunities, and when we're scared to focus on something because like, oh my God, am I gonna limit the type of clients or the amount of clients can I get? And just to get to that point in your own mind, like to reconcile that and feel comfortable saying this, I'm only gonna focus on this. That's a huge step that I don't think anybody teaches you how to do that. Is that something that you have to develop yourself? That's awesome. I love to know about your transition to podcasting, leveraging digital media, because that's one of the things that I'm very fascinated by what you do. I'm an architect as well as you are, and I love technology. I love podcasting. I love social media, and I see that you have really leveraged your own brand, and now you're evolving your business to deliver even more value using design and technology together. So you guys had the firm, you guys are happy doing your projects, very successful. When did you start thinking about using internet and all these technologies to take the firm and your business to another level?
Yeah, it sort of evolved, and then once I realized that it was something that I was born to do, that it sort of was my purpose, I went all in on it. And so the story is when Anne-Marie and I launched our firm, we found our place within the firm. Anne-Marie is a traditional design architect, very good designer, loves what she does as an architect, but doesn't like the business side. I could give or take the design side. I like it, but it's not something that I'm passionate about, but I am purely passionate about business. I love business. I love the business side of things, and I look at it as a game. Yeah. A game with rules that if you can learn those rules and you understand what those rules are and you get really, really good at those rules, you can be really successful, right? Just like a sport. Yeah. Right? If you get really good at it and you practice it over and over and over again, you get really good at it as long as you know what the rules are. Mm-hmm. And so I love that. And so I, as an architect, as a partner who was running the firm, I was looking for that information on the internet, and there was no information for architects in early 2000s. 2007, I launched a blog called Entrearchitect. I had previously written a blog called Living Well in Westchester in 2006, specifically for my clients. That became very successful marketing strategy, and I realized, okay, that works. In 2007, I launched a blog called Entrearchitect. And that was really for myself. It was a place for me to publish links and stories and articles and my own thoughts about business, just a place where I can put it all, right? And be able to reference it very quickly. But because it was on the internet, many people found it very quickly. Architects found it because, like I said, there was nothing on the internet for architects who were looking for information on business. And so when they searched for it, they found my blog. Mm-hmm. And so that blog very quickly grew an audience. And in the comments, a community was formed, which is the same community that is the Entrearchitect community today, but it was just a few people back in 2007, and it was in the comments of the blog. And those people grew, and we became friends, and we became a community. And that community, along the way, over the years, started to encourage me to turn it into something bigger, more than just a blog, more than just for myself. But, maybe it's a magazine, maybe it's a website, maybe it's whatever it is. And so in 2012, I announced on the blog that I was going to launch a project called the 12-12-12 Project. And I would announce what that is on December 12th, 2012. And that, and I challenged my readers to do the same thing. So the community, I said, you have your own 12-12-12 project. And the rules are, you need to do something that will change your life and make the world a better place.
Wow,
right?
Nice.
Something big.
Yeah.
Right? So do that on December 12th, 2012, announce what it is and go for it. And so my 12-12-12 project was Entrearchitect.com with the intent of making it into a platform for small firm architects to learn better businesses. From day one, that was the plan from December 12th on. The same day, I launched Entrearchitect podcast on December 12th, 2012 at 12:12 p.m.
That's
I
awesome.
launched the first episode of Entrearchitect podcast, the introduction to it, and which is still on there if anybody wants to hear it. It's actually one of my favorites because it sort of tells the whole story of why I did it. And you also hear the quality difference. And now I'm at 300. I just recorded episode 340.
Wow.
So it's been a long time since I started my first one. But that community encouraged me to turn it into something bigger. And so in December 12th, 2012, I launched Entrearchitect as a platform for small firm architects. And it's grown significantly ever since. And it's become my primary business and my purpose. It is something that I intend to grow way, way beyond me. And it has become very successful. And really the thing that drives me most is that it is helping the profession. And that's my purpose. The purpose is not to build a big business. The purpose is to impact the world through architects.
Yes.
And I believe that when architects are successful, individual architects are successful financially, that they are better architects. They have more time to focus on the things that make them good architects when they have the money to run their business. And so if I can impact millions of people through architects, right? Architects building better businesses, the profession gets better. And because architects throughout the world are now more successful from being individually more successful, those architects then impact the world because we build the world, right? Everything that's built is not everything that's built, but much of the built environment throughout the world is affected and can be affected. It all can be affected by the work that architects do. And so that's my purpose. Individually help individual architects be more successful. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the most powerful things you just said is, that moment when you gain clarity to understand what's your purpose in life, and you have that clear, and you just execute toward that purpose. And I can tell you that it's working because, you have been of great positive influence in my life. I think I probably found your blog in 2007 because I was always been, interested in the business side of architecture, and I've been following you for years, and I've been listening probably not all your podcasts, but a pretty good amount of your podcasts. And you can, what that purpose of what you want to do is working, because that's one of the reasons why we're talking, and that's one of the beauty of technology, that if it wasn't because of these platforms that we're using, I wouldn't never know about yourself. But now we're connected, and first I want to thank you for what you're doing, because you're really making a huge impact. What you're trying to do, it's working. And not only the business side of architecture, there are a lot of other deeper things that maybe we never talk about, but I sense a lot of things that are just good things that I get when I hear you talking with other people, where we're, talk about certain situations and circumstances that they go way beyond just the practice of architecture. They go about, they're more about, being a good human being, having a positive impact in the world. How do you have a a mindset of progress, a mindset of sharing, abundance, understanding. You know, all those things come across that might not be very direct, but I receive them, I see them, and they have been a great help on my life.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for saying that. That is very important to me, and I appreciate you for saying that. That is, I take my platform very seriously. I take the responsibility of as the platform grows and more people can hear what I say. I have a purpose, right? I
Sure.
really believe that God has put me on this planet to do what I'm doing.
Sure.
And so if I can use that platform to make the world better every day, right? So yes, if architects get better, the profession gets better, the world gets better. But if I can say something that makes people look at their life differently, or if they can look at other people differently, or look at the profession differently, right? We've traditionally been so secretive.
Yes.
And so private in architecture that if I can shift that in our community from privacy to transparency,
Yes.
to sharing and caring for one another. Something I say at the end of every podcast is love, learn, share. Those are my 3 lessons in life.
Yeah.
If I leave no other lessons, it's love, learn, share. Love one another, care for one another, take care of one another everywhere you go. Then learn everything that you possibly can, and then share everything you know with everybody around you. If we all did that, all these problems that we'd be dealing with now would not be problems, right?
Yeah.
But we're working on it. So if we can impact one person at a time by having a message beyond be a successful architect, then I'm really, really happy.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jack. I appreciate you for saying that.
Sure. No,
and thank you for being a member of the community.
We'll be right back with more from the Power of Design podcast.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
And it's very inspiring and empowering to see you performing at your, I think it's the sweet spot where your talents match your purpose. And I'm sure you don't feel like you're working. I think you're just having fun doing what you like, and you just happen to make a business out of that.
I really do enjoy it. I really do enjoy it. It at times it's a struggle. I can tell you that. It's, because I'm pushing to grow very large, and I have to take lots of risks and do lots of things in order to get to where I want to go. And that means I'm probably not making a lot of money, and that's true. Not making a lot of money in anything I'm doing yet, but the impact that we potentially can have is significant, and that's one of the reasons I launched Gabl Media, which is you had alluded to that. And Gabl Media is a completely new business. So it's on top of Entrearchitect. It's a separate company called Gabl Media Incorporated. And it is a platform for the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. It's curated thought leadership is what we're trying to do, which is what we are doing. We're taking leaders throughout the industry and providing services so they can expand their existing platforms. So leaders who are already out there doing what they do, like you, Jack, who have either a blog or they speak publicly, or they have a YouTube channel, or some sort of leadership, right, in the profession. Maybe they're leaders in the profession, like literally like in AIA, and they want to build out a podcast, or they want to build a YouTube channel, and they don't know how, or they don't have the time, or they just don't want to do that part, but they would love to be able to use that channel as a medium. That's what Gabl Media is doing. It's providing the services for those leaders to be able to expand their platforms in order to expand the message that they have to share with others. So again, same theory, share your knowledge, the world gets better. And so the idea is to take what I've learned at Entrearchitect podcast and leverage that to build it into a media company that will allow us to do that for tens, hundreds, thousands of future platforms.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And there is a huge need in our profession and our industry to have more of that type of communication. I think as you mentioned before, traditionally, business has been like this secret formula that you don't want to share because you're scared that they're going to steal your formula or it's not going to work anymore. And we're getting to the realization that the more you share, the better, because we can learn from each other and make it better. And that idea that you have to create that platform specifically from the industry, I think is going to be a great refresher. And I know there's going to be a lot of people in line to start being part of that community. Tell me about also, I've heard on some of your podcasts and in the Entrearchitect community, more talks about opening the platform beyond architecture and touching all the other areas and professions that are tangent to what we do. We also work with engineers, we work with product recs, we work with all these other professionals that they're also in the day-to-day doing work with us. Tell me about that initiative that you're starting regarding that.
Sure. The Entrearchitect platform has a Facebook community that is thriving. I launched it several years ago, and it has grown to be more than 6,000 architects. It's a private community. It is only architects and architecture students. So you have to be trained as an architect to be permitted into the group. What that allows is honest, transparent conversation, which has resulted in very, very engaged conversation within that group because it's private. So we can ask any question that we want and not worry that our clients will hear it or our contractors might hear it or consultants, right? It's just us architects having conversations in there. And every day there's a dozen, 24 questions with 50 to 100 comments on every single one of them. It's a very engaged community. And it is by itself changing lives. That it's something I started, but it has become its own thing. And it has a culture of positivity. That's something that was very intentional on my part. To have a place where architects can be positive with one another, that they're not going to be judged, so they can openly ask a question and not be attacked that they might not know, or they do it a different way. You're not allowed to be aggressive, and you can have a disagreement, you can have a debate, but you can't bully one another. You can't do all the things that happen on Facebook outside of our group, inside our group. If you want to do that, if you want to debate politics, you want to have an argument, go do that somewhere else. There's thousands of other places you can do that. You can't do that within our community. So, and it is a broad community, right? So they have lots of different perspectives, but when you're in this group, we are a family, and we're going to act like one, and we're going to treat one another that way. And so that's become a very positive place. And it is affecting many, many people on a very personal level. And so outside of that community, non-architects have been wanting to get into that group for a long time for many reasons, right? They want to interact with the architects there. They want to have that engaged conversation with architects. And so after many years of having requests of non-architects access that group, I've decided, well, why don't I just make a second group with the same intent, right? With the same rules, but it's open to everybody. So I invite all the architects from the Entrearchitect community to join that group too, and everybody else who's an ally to the architects. And so it's actually called Architects and Allies. And that's a new brand, essentially, Architects and Allies. And it is a private Facebook group. Same rules as you have to be a member of the AEC industry to be in that group. So architects, engineers, and that's a very broad spectrum. So it can be manufacturers, it can be representatives, it can be media. Anybody who's involved in the industry can be in that group. I have moderators in that group that help the conversation grow, which is another thing that we've learned over on the architect side. I can't do any of what I'm doing alone, so I need support. And so in that Facebook group, we have some great moderators. In the new Facebook group, the Architects and Allies group, we have some great moderators. And that group has grown very significantly, very quickly too. And in the Entrearchitect community, at Entrearchitect, we have a membership. So we have 2 levels of membership. One is resources and training, which is the basic membership. And then we have an advanced membership called Masterminds, where they have weekly mastermind meetings. We have 14 mastermind groups. Very successful, very impactful to the people who join those groups. They become advisory board members for those members. They become friends. They become lifelong friends. And so that's been very impactful. And so I thought, well, let's offer that to that group too. Let's build a mastermind group for Architects and Allies.
Yeah.
So it'll be architects and all the people who are supporting. So they can brainstorm together. And so we have a group of 10 people in the Architects and Allies mastermind group that meet weekly, just started. And the intent is to have open, honest conversations, support one another, learn from one another, and have those conversations that we're not having anywhere else, which is what that Facebook group is for and what the mastermind group is for, because, we're being really secretive there too, right? That the manufacturers only want to hear, only want to say what they want us to hear. Media is only going to share the stories that they want to share. If there's realtors are going to, have an opinion about architects, and architects are going to have an opinion about contractors.
Yeah.
But when you're in a one-on-one conversation with people, now you're talking to a human being. You're not talking to a demographic or a typology. You're talking to a person, and you think about that person in a different way. You can get much further along in life and together by having these conversations within these private groups.
Yeah.
And so it's been really successful, both on the architect side and now on the Architects and Allies side.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's going to help a lot. And the more conversations we have, the more we'll understand each other, help each other, grow better businesses and do better architecture overall. What will you think, Mark, is going to be the future of design and construction? Thinking about, 15, 20 years down the line, how do you think technology is going to impact what we're doing and what we're building?
Yeah, it is an amazing. You had alluded to it earlier, Jack, that this technology that we have, where you and I can have this conversation, it's how Entrearchitect has grown so significantly, is being able to leverage the technology that we have, the communication technology through Facebook and Zoom and all the different ways that we communicate with one another. That's certainly, especially with the pandemic, that's changed forever, right?
Yeah.
Everything that we do is going to be done differently from this point forward. And I believe in a very positive way. I think that this becomes a hybrid of the old way and the new way, and we're leveraging the new ways to improve the old ways. In terms of technology and the future of architecture, I'll answer that question in a second, but I want to just pitch two new podcasts on
Sure.
Gabl Media.
Yeah.
One is Troxel podcast, which is Evan Troxel's solo podcast. He is one of the co-hosts of ArchiSpeak, which started around the same time Entrearchitect started ArchiSpeak podcast, is also on the network. But Troxel is Evan's solo project, and he is having long form, deep conversations, and he is a technology junkie. He loves technology and what technology is going to do to the future of architects. So he's bringing in the people who are developing the next generation of technology into a conversation that's over an hour long. And he goes wherever that conversation goes.
Sure.
So they're talking about personal things. They're talking about, where technology is going, what they like for breakfast. He's talking about all of it. And fascinating conversations. And when you hear those conversations and you hear about what's being developed today in technology, it really makes you look at the profession in a very different way. First of all, I think it's a very positive message that technology will change our profession, and it will change in a very significant way. I also see on the more sobering side that if architects don't embrace the technology rather than fight it, architects will go away. Architects will become obsolete because the technology that's being developed could replace them with other types of of professionals running that technology, right? So if architects don't embrace the future of technology and become the leaders in that technology, then architecture goes away. And some of those conversations are very sobering when you see the automation that's happening and the AI that's happening and the machine learning that's happening and being developed, that architects need to be aware of what's being developed and become the forefront and the leaders in embracing and executing services and products using the future technology.
Yep.
The other podcast I would just mention is Evelyn Lee's and Janine Chastain's new podcast called Practice Disrupted. And what they're talking about, they're talking to professionals in the industry who are looking at architecture sort of in the same vein, but looking at it in terms of practice. And how do you define architecture in the future, right? How do you allow architecture to evolve beyond what we're doing today as architects, maybe beyond building, in many different ways, right? So if we can expand the definition of what an architect is and what an architect does, we can gain much more control over our future as a profession. And so those conversations are also super interesting and eye-opening. And so those two podcasts are really interesting in terms of looking at the future of architects, talking to people who are in development of the future.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah. Those are really good. I've listened to both of them and they're really good. I really enjoy those conversations that are not conversations that are typically had in a typical business setting or architecture world. You don't talk about those things, and just having the opportunity to listen to that is very eye-opening and inspiring, just to come up with ideas for innovation and things that you can implement to your own practice.
Yeah. But in terms of my thoughts on the future of architecture, I believe that architects will become more entrepreneurial. So I believe that architects will naturally evolve beyond what we're doing today as architects. I also believe that the current generation who are becoming architects today, and the next generation of architects are naturally entrepreneurs. Through much of what you said earlier, Jack, the access to internet from birth is significant, right? That the internet is just become part of their existence. Where my generation, the internet evolved from no access to what it is today. We saw, I started prior to computers in the office for design, and so I lived that transition. The current generation that's coming in now, we're born with iPads in their hands, right? And so or technology. The next generation certainly will be born with iPads in their hands. And so the idea of sharing is coming naturally because that's what social media does. It's social. We share this. My kids share everything on the internet, right? That's what Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram, that's where it is, right? It's all about sharing their daily lives. And so they come intuitively to come share. And when things are not shared, they're like, wait a minute, why is this not shared? And so that will change everything. That this and the next generation of architects will naturally be a sharing mentality, but they're also entrepreneurs, also because the internet shows them that you can build your own business and you can impact the world through the work you do as an architect or as a business person, as an entrepreneur. And so they're already thinking, even as children, how do I follow my purpose and make a lot of money doing it? Those two things as kids, they start thinking about that, right? The idea of going to college and working in a big office somewhere isn't the future.
Right.
The future are these ideas. I am a unique individual with unique ideas. I have the technology and the capacity to leverage that idea into a business and live the life that I love to live, right? And run my own life. Architects are going to do the same thing. They're already starting to do that. It certainly has allowed me to do what I do and follow my purpose. And so the future of architecture is bright, and it is positive. And I believe that we will expand the definition of architects beyond the built environment, and impact the world through the way we think and the way we act as architects.
Yeah, no, I think this is a very exciting time to not only to be alive, but to be practicing architecture. Even going through the pandemic, at least on my business, has been very exciting because it had forced me to do many things that I would not have done otherwise. So to really embrace technology, to really develop strategically social media plans and develop things that I was not doing in the past, putting more emphasis on leveraging technology, on how to deliver the services, how to sell, how to improve my brand. And I feel very excited because it's just that the perfect opportunity for innovation and the perfect opportunity to use your design thinking skills, your creativity, to leverage it toward your business, which is what we all really want. And the other thing is, when we're talking about the access to technology, and I agree with that now, since kids have access to more information, and as we said before, sometimes we didn't know it was okay to start a business without experience, but nobody told you that. Now you can see that it can be done. There are certain steps, and experience is important, but it can be done. There are ways to do things. And I think the main thing that I really appreciate about technology is that you can use it either way. It's just a tool. But one of the good things is that it opens your mind and breaks through a lot of limiting beliefs we have once we know somebody else is doing something that we thought we could do, but we never had proof that it was possible. So it's breaking a lot of limitations, and I think that's why now entrepreneurship is very hot and exciting, and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, which is not easy and it's not for everybody, but at least it's not this very high goal that is so difficult to achieve and nobody knows how to do it, and there are all these secrets. All the information is out there, and at the end of the day, it's about the execution of how you make those things happen. Mark, tell me about how does the power of design impact who you are and what you do?
When it comes down to the essence of who I am and my purpose on this planet, it is leveraging my skills as a designer to impact the world in a positive way.
Yep.
And so whether that's through architecture and through the architecture I do on an individual basis, family by family with the work that we do, or whether it's through Entrearchitect, where I'm working individually, architect by architect, to help improve their lives so their skills as architects and designers can impact the world in a positive way, all the way through to Gabl Media, where we're providing a platform for other architects to do similar things and expand their platforms to exponentially grow the message that design can impact the world in a positive way. That's everything that I've become. It is my purpose on this planet. And so hopefully we can continue to grow that and make it something significant in the profession and throughout the world. And when I'm all done and here and finished on the planet, that I've had a significant impact in a positive way on the people who are here with me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that goes to the definition or understanding what design is. And I think sometimes we equate design to artistic expression, which is one way to design. But I always go back to the power of design is, I think you're a great designer because you're designing businesses, you're designing strategies, you're designing connections, you're designing platforms. Just the fact that it is not easy to see it visually doesn't mean that they're not design skills. And I think we all have the ability to be great designers with the tools that we have. There are people who design with numbers and they design very profitable businesses. And I think once you open up the definition of design, you can really leverage that.
Yeah, I believe that the designers can save the world because we're the problem solvers, right? You give us a problem and we'll use the skills that we have as designers to come up with solutions. And when you take that and you connect that to the internet and to the world of technology and the machines that are being developed, that that idea really excites me, that we as architects, individual architects, linked together, right? So now we have thousands of us who are now problem solvers, all working on the same problem at the same time, leveraging the technology that's being built to also help us solve that problem. We can change the world. We can fix all of the problems that we have once we build out that network and be able to provide a platform that allows us to do that. That is something that is my long-term plan, to build that platform that allows us to take all of our collective knowledge, leverage the technology we have, and go after some of these big, potentially not even non-building issues, society issues, societal issues. All these big problems that we're having can be fixed if we use the power of design. And so we'll see what happens.
Thanks, man. That was a great way to end the podcast. And I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate what you're doing. And, you have been a great inspiration and motivation for me. And keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing a great job. And I look forward to keep consuming your content and stay in touch.
I will. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate you for what you're doing here on the podcast. And I appreciate you being a member of the community for all these years and the support you've given me. So I appreciate you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Find out more about Jack and OSA Studio at osastudio.com. and follow us on Instagram at The Power of Design Podcast. Thank you.